This is the Art and Science of Leadership podcast, and we are Steer LLC, a group of incredible leaders, operators, thinkers, entrepreneurs, attorneys who just care deeply about leadership and management and organizational development. And once again, backed by popular demand, we have an unbelievable member of our team in Amy Larkin joining us today. And we're talking about a topic that Amy and I have taken different paths on, but has been really central to our success and central to those around us, the organizations and the people around us that have in their own performance that has been so pivotal to their success. And that is positive relational energy, or just a more general topic or term of energy. Because at the end of the day, energy is defined as what? It's the ability to do work. That's what energy is. And so there's so many contexts to this, but I couldn't have a better person with me right now in this moment to talk about positive relational energy than Amy Larkin. Amy, welcome back, my friend.
Thanks, Chris, for having me. And as you know, my favorite subject. I don't
Oh,
think there could be a topic that I get more excited to talk about than
no,
energy.
I get that. I mean, our discussions that you and I have had really speak to that for sure. I think our greatest challenge is going to be limiting this to 15 minutes. Is going to be the
I we
great.
could talk about this for 2 days, Chris.
It's
Quite
going to be the
frankly.
greatest challenge. Well, look, you and I have had these really interesting experiences where we first sort
Mhm.
of started to be aware of these aha moments of energy. And I want to hear, you've got some really cool stories. I want to hear one in particular you referenced earlier, but one for me was the idea of playing in Division One sport. Energy really mattered. Because whether it was in a practice session or whether it was in a game, when the team felt flat, when the energy was low, when it was, and again, I don't mean it in terms of rah rah all the time. That's not it. It's a different kind of energy. It's an energy of affirmation. It's an energy of solidarity. It's an energy of of just support and encouragement. And that can show up in different ways. But that's when I really started to feel it. When we would succeed or not, energy was related there, right, Amy? There's an
Sure.
interconnectedness of things. But tell us when you started to sense that energy.
Sure. And Chris, just to tailspin off of your comment there, I think we all love sport, right? And we can relate to sport. And I think that a lot of the successes that we've seen out there in the history of sport have directly correlated to the energy or the culture within an organization. So it isn't
Yeah.
necessarily always about talent, right? It's about that positive energy that coach, the leaders of those teams bring each and every day to always be forward thinking, to always stay positive, to always look at a failure and be able to learn from it and move forward very, very quickly instead of dwelling on the negative vibes and coming
Yeah.
to the locker room or to the field or to the court, in a bad place, right?
Yeah.
It is about next play, next play, next play. But in terms of my personal experience, very type A, very high energy. I think from the moment I came out of the womb, my family will attest
Yeah.
to. And so most of my life growing up, um, I brought the energy to a lot of places, right? And I did not have that energy self-awareness that we'll talk a lot about
Mm,
today.
mm.
I just was who I was, and I would walk into a room, and if people mirrored my energy, it was going to be a great day. And if they didn't, I probably walked right back out of the room
Mhm.
and went and found another place that I could be me, and people would either marry and mimic my own energy,
Yeah.
or they would bring themselves up to that level. So when I was younger, it was all about riding big wheels and playing sports and those sorts of things, and I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
And in the early 2000s, as my career was just taking off, there's a very specific core moment memory of
Mm.
mine to where it was that first aha.
Mm-hmm.
energy self-awareness moment, Chris, where I would come into work every day fired up. I mean, we were in growth mode. It was the early days. We were not short on energy walking the halls at all.
Sure.
And I would start my day in the best mood, singing songs on the way to work and high fiving people in the hallways. Things would be going great, but sometime in the afternoon, I would recognize that I was drained, I
Mm.
was moody, my attitude had completely changed, and I wasn't bringing my whole self to the afternoon,
Yeah.
um, to my fellow colleagues, to the people I was leading. And it became a very reflective time for me in my career.
Yeah.
I was upset about it. I couldn't quite pinpoint what was happening and where this was coming from. And so I started journaling, probably for the first time ever in my life. And it sounds really funny, but I needed to identify what was happening. And it wasn't
Mhm.
obvious to me. Again, probably because I did not really have an energy issue
Yeah.
in my past parts of my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so I started journaling, and I quickly realized within about a week or two that I was pinpointing it to one person that I was having lunch with every day.
Interesting.
And that person was very negative
Mm.
from the onset of our conversation. And I became that dumping place for her,
Mm.
to bring all the negativity and the woes and all the things that were wrong and all the people that weren't doing things right and so forth and so on. And it was draining every bit of my fuel tank.
Yeah.
And I knew at that time I had to make a change. And I was conflicted because I didn't want to cause a conflict at work.
Mhm.
And so I very tactfully and strategically decided to start scheduling meetings around that same time so I could get
Mhm.
myself out of
Sure.
that environment, and
Yep.
away from that negativity, because that person wasn't in meetings with me throughout the day. This was
Yeah.
just that 1 hour I was spending with her.
Interesting.
And it was such a reflective moment about how much one person, and 1 hour of my day could change the whole trajectory of how I thought, how I showed up,
Yep.
how I led. And it became that moment in my career where I said, this
Yeah.
is not okay. And so
Yeah.
I had a choice to make.
Sure.
And luckily I made the right choice. But I think, one of my favorite books is, by John Gordon, The Energy Bus. And I
Mhm. Yeah.
realized that I was amongst an energy vampire,
Yes.
and
Yes.
she was sucking the life out of me every day, and that I had a zero energy vampire tolerance at that point. It didn't mean that I was changing the way that I acted towards her at
Right?
all. I just was removing myself from allowing, that drain and that pool of my fuel tank in place. So that's my example, and a really, really, I would say, a big moment in my career, my life, to where I became very energy aware, but
Yeah.
I also knew that I was the one driving the bus, and I was the one able to make the choice, of being a good leader, of being a good teammate, and bringing my whole self, my whole positive self, to every conversation that I had.
Love the example. It makes it so much more accessible, Amy, when we have such a concrete example of that, layers of that. So the energy awareness, love the energy self-awareness. I think that's a critical context here that people can learn from. In addition, the idea of you journaling, which that's going to be a different episode of the tools that we use to really tap into our subconscious and help us drive, take self awareness into action. But I love that you did that. And then you put the plan together and into place to remove the energy vampire from the situation because that was impacting more than just you. That was
Right.
impacting your team. It was impacting your leadership, and so it's a brilliant example. And I think what I also love is you connected it to culture. You connected
Right.
it to culture. We
Yes.
cannot be successful professionally, organizationally, if we don't we cannot maintain, of course, there's going to be dips and ebbs and flows, but if we can't maintain a positive relational energy, we will see performance drop. We will see performance drop. And for, I'll give you one more example. When it was probably 2000, I don't know, 14, 15, maybe a little bit later, I was introduced to some research by Emma Seppälä and Kim Cameron out of Harvard. And they wrote a series of articles in Harvard Business Review about positive relational energy. And they put a name to it, Amy. They put some research behind it about the fact that, yes, we can actually see a correlative effect, a relationship between positive relational energy from leaders and managers and performance.
That's
Now,
right.
we might intuitively think, well, sure, but we couldn't really put a name to it and put some rigor and planning around it until we understood it better. And now we're so well aware of the fact that when there is consistency in positive relational energy coming from leadership and management, the organization performs better. Why wouldn't we seek to understand that more?
That's
This
right.
idea of, and I want to demystify here the fact that that has to be rah rah. You and I are both of the DNA and of the personality and behavior that we actually do tend to be those that like to jump on a table and rock and roll and get her. But that's not it's not how it has to manifest for it to be effective at all. And so I address it, and I want your perspective on this, Amy, it's when someone walks into the room and you're like, oh, good, Amy's here, right? Because I'm affirmed. I know she's going to ask good questions. I know she's going to challenge me. I know that she's going to support and encourage me. We perform better when that is present. When do we fail to perform? When we lack confidence.
That's right.
So that energy is so tied to. So I love that you brought in this idea of culture and performance being directly affected by this energy.
And Chris, people are going to have good and bad days, right? So this isn't
100%.
about saying, hey, you can't have a bad day, or a business or a team can't have
Exactly.
a loss every now and then. But this is about the majority of the time,
That's right.
right? And I relate it to a fuel tank, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes the fuel tank is full and you're coming in and you are ready to jump on the table. And other times you're really low, right?
Yeah.
And you need to be able to pull energy off of other people.
Mm.
And sometimes you may just not be in the best mood. You may be having a down day. And you've afforded yourself the right to do that. But I think it's, again, being aware of how you show up as a leader
Yes.
to your team.
Yes.
And even being vocal about, hey, I'm not having such a great day today.
Bingo.
Team, I need you guys to lean in a little bit with me here. Everybody always has stuff going on
Yeah.
in their lives. And so that's another thing I think that is important to acknowledge here is things are heavy today.
That's right.
They're very,
That's
very
right.
heavy.
Yes.
There are a lot of things that people are going through outside of the work environment, right?
Yeah.
Outside of performance. And I think being able to read your team and really being able to know when somebody might need you to lean in with them and
Mm-hmm.
listen and
Mm-hmm.
be engaged, that's what it's about,
No
right?
question about it.
Leaders have a really big responsibility. And we talked about this the last podcast. That is a
Yeah.
responsibility that is not for everyone.
No.
It's not for everyone.
That's right.
And there is a part of my career as well where I very clearly understood the difference between people managers and people who are never meant to be people managers. And that's
Right
okay.
on. And that's
That is
okay.
okay. Yeah,
Um,
it
a,
is.
a perfect segue, my friend, into this next section of our time together, which is the idea that, remember, when leadership is required to set the tone. We set the tone. That includes energy. As a leader, what is one of our superpowers? It should be to see the interconnectedness and interrelatedness of things.
Yeah.
And then that allows us to be able to modulate the energy to ensure that we are focused on the things that matter most. And that starts with people. You and I are absolutely of the same school of people produce performance, period, right? Yes, there's purpose. Yes, there's plan. Yes, there's process. Yes, there's systems and tools, of course.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's the human dynamic that is driving the performance of the organization. That being said, you need to be able to wrap your arms around what that energy is among your team, among your direct reports, among the broader organization. What is that energy doing for people? Depleting them or energizing them? Is it affirming them and confirming them, or is it are people playing scared rather than playing confident? That's such a key part for us.
It is. It's really everything.
It is.
It's
Yeah,
really
you're right.
everything.
You're right.
And I know that you have said this quite a few times, and it is a phrase that I've heard from a lot of other leaders. Is you know, people do not leave companies; they leave people.
No doubt.
And that could not be
No doubt.
more critical to this conversation than that.
Yeah.
And so again, situational awareness, energy awareness,
Yes.
um, all the different components that make up being a leader on a team, all come down to, are you driving people to grow, right?
Bingo.
Are you empowering your team? And are you mentoring them for the next step?
Yeah.
Preparing for this, I watched, one of your old podcasts actually, to where you really talk about plants. I loved it. It was one of
Yeah.
my favorite examples. Plants all turn towards the sun, right?
Mhm.
Because that's where they get their energy and their fuel to grow.
Right on.
So are you the sun? Are
Yeah.
you a place, a person within your organization, or even your family or your team, right? It
Yeah.
does not have to be about business all the time. How are you showing up? And are people turning towards you for that
Boy,
growth, that
that is
energy?
a mic drop moment, my friend. And that heliotropic leadership as the sun. And there's some attribution that I want to give because we haven't interviewed him yet, but you and I definitely should, Amy, which is Dr. Harry Cohen, who has authored some interesting work around Be the Sun. And it's so true. Like, be that heliotropic leader where people are turning towards you for sustenance and growth and development. So that is a perfect way for us to bring this particular episode to an end. But Amy Larkin, I think we've given a lot of people some cool things to think about as it relates to energy, positive relational energy, energy self-awareness, heliotropic energy. So I think there might be a part two for this particular episode, but more to come on that. Amy, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And remember, stay away from those vampires. That's what I
Stay
like to
away from the
say.
energy vampires. Right on.
Identify them and redirect.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.